stop.
Yes. And this is pretty interesting when Expedia is fully there.
Oh, yeah.
But F5 is moving, you know that, they're moving downtown.
Yeah.
They're one building.
Yeah, but still. Where are you going?
These are students that are here. So. Because yeah.
No, he is. He's filming up. He's not.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's the camera.
It's amazing.
This he would have used. And now I know why I always want to be in the green rooms, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, it was something we just couldn't get today. They were all filled in. All right?
Yes.
Okay.
Now we're looking from the, I'm looking there.
You can watch.
Thank you.
So if you
See you
see a
later.
problem, and then what he'll do, so like all this.
Yeah, they'll take it out, right? So people aren't watching it live.
No, we're not streaming. We could have, but I didn't get. What is it? Right.
Just,
Yeah.
you know, this gives you a little bit more flexibility.
So how did you find out about this workshop?
I got an email.
You got an email.
I think the event.
Eventbrite, you found it?
Searching, yeah.
Yeah, good. Different ways that people get it.
Yeah, an email, and it was on our announcement on Blackboard.
Oh, okay.
So
And what is that?
Blackboard, so you're a student?
I'm a student.
Yeah, that's how I know. Ding, ding,
Yeah,
ding.
MBA student. So
Oh, wonderful.
told Laura.
Oh, Laura forwarded it to everybody.
Is she in there?
No,
Oh,
I don't know if she's upstairs. She might be here today, but she's not.
No, I thought she's one of the
No.
presenters.
This Laura is the
This
presenter.
Laura.
Oh, it's a different Laura.
Right,
Okay.
from Salvation Army.
Okay, this we got one Laura.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, you don't have a name tag?
I forgot my work name tag.
All right, let's make it a name
I don't
tag.
know that I need it. Do I need it?
No, you don't need to. But like, you know. So we might get a few more people to come in, but I'd like to respect everybody's time, maybe efforts to come through this terrible weather and get here. So, my name is Libby Stellis. I'm the director of the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy here at CU. Before I go into anything else, the truly important things. If you go back out the hallway that you came down, there's the restrooms are there. Because we're an open public building, you have to put your hand on the pad, and then it's 1847 star. So 1847 star to get you in either to the men's facility or the men. I know you will be rapt at attention, but if for some reason you have to get online, you're going to look for city you guessed on your choices. You're going to put in your, it's going to ask you for your email. You can put in your email. It does not hold your email. It just confirms that you're a person who has an email. And so it will let you on the system. So those are two of them. But of course, nobody really needs to do that. So the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, I left you a brochure. City University is connected and affiliated with National University, which is a university system, nonprofit university system like Seattle U. City U. And in California, and they have a very large donor, Denny Sanford, who's a billionaire who wants to do what else. Yay! Love to hear that. So he had some areas that he was very interested in giving towards education, and one of them was around family. He's a person who somehow, some way, a person would find some address and send a letter that said, please give us $100,000 or something crazy like that. And he was bewildered because he knew that he had no relationship with these people. There was no connection at all. And his background, and he made his billions in sales and finance. So he wanted to bring business ideas to nonprofits, especially in the area of fundraising, because that's what your sales are in a nonprofit. And so he gave the money to create the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, and now it's at actually 12 universities So we're all about continuing education for primarily fundraising, but all areas of nonprofit. We do it as cost effectively as we can. And we try to bring some of those ideas, sales ideas, to the fundraising arena. We also have always had, and I left this for you too, City University has a great master's in professional leadership with an emphasis in nonprofits. City U is about 47 years old, nonprofit, was created for the working adult. Our average student is 36 years old. They are working and going to school and having families, trying to manage all those things. And so when we started, all of the large universities, including UW, did not have evening and weekend programs. They hadn't yet figured out that the 18 to 22-year-old college student was not not everybody fit that. So that's how we started. We, in the 90s, we actually started correspondence learning, literally mailing things back and forth. And so when online learning was created, we jumped into that and are one of the oldest places that have done online learning. I know there's some students here, one of my students, who maybe do some of your classes online. This master's is a great one to, if that's something in your future to look at, as well as we have a great MBA. They can be done completely online for people who are very busy and they're online at your pace within a quarter system, of course. So there are things resources that we have for you. You have my card, you have paper and pen, and you have to, has everybody figured out what this is? That's your bookmark, right? So one of the reasons I pointed out is because our tagline these days is we're all about the finish. Students who attend City University are twice as likely as the national average to finish their program. So we're very proud of that. So that's a little bit of me. I want to first introduce Laura and then ask each one of you to introduce yourself. So, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Good morning. My name is Laura Marini Baker, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for the Salvation Army here in the Northwest. I'm responsible for marketing and PR in Washington State and parts of Idaho and Montana. And I've been there for about 7 years. Before I was working in the social services area, I spent 20 years in the arts. And most of that was working for a company called Broadway Across America, which managed tours of Broadway shows. And I was responsible for marketing and PR in several cities on the West Coast. That was a for-profit company, and we partnered with nonprofit theaters around the country. And I am so grateful for that experience working in the for-profit sector. I think, like Libby was saying, and the Stanford Institute is focused on the business of nonprofits and fundraising. There's really very little difference between for-profit and nonprofit in what we are doing. We're selling, and in our case, selling is fundraising. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today. I think that's probably enough of an intro.
Okay, great. Rob? The name and where you're
Sure.
connected, or
Sure, I'm not connected anywhere. I'm not in control. I'm just here to learn and learn a little bit about nonprofit.
great.
I'm Michael Tessier. I'm also in development at the Civic Science.
Great.
Cassie Welliver, manager of Carco Theater. I have a master's in arts management from Carnegie Mellon, but I still feel like I need a lot of fundraising.
Great.
I also work in development.
Oh, great. Science Center as well, right? Did you?
Science Center. Love the Science Center.
Walk over, right?
Yes,
Yes.
very.
Yes, it's very good.
Mary Emerson, I live in Seattle, but I've had many years of experience mostly in cultural institutions, fundraising in New York, also as an educator.
Great. Great. How long have you been in Seattle?
Less than a year.
Oh, welcome.
Oh, welcome to the weather.
The summer is the
Summer
way
was great.
always. The summer is the way. You'll know.
I'm Joyce Henderson, and I work for Fair Start. That's a nonprofit, and I am in communications and marketing and very good deal.
Right?
Hello, everybody. My name is Mohammed Shamia. I'm an MBA student.
And what is written your emphasis area?
Project management. I'm actually in the last course.
Oh, you're
So,
seeing the end of the
yeah,
line.
I'm wrapping it up.
Great.
Hey everyone, I'm Ronan Shah. For student at City University, pursuing MBA in business marketing.
I'm Joanna Mehdi. I'm from Mongolia and I'm a current student at CEU. Great. I am Bianca, and I am also a student in my university.
Oh, okay, good. So, and at least one of you was so previous to starting this job, I actually was teaching here at CEU in the MBA program. Some of my students. It's great. So we're going to have a combination of presentation. All of the Sanford Institute programs are based on this cause selling cycle, which when you look at it, you kind of go, oh, of course, that if you want to reach people and embrace them to be a part of your community, which means they have three things to give: time, talent, and treasure. Then you're going to prospect, you're going to look for where are the places that we're going to find these people. And then how do we want to approach them? Because different people in different ways get approached in ways that work for them. We have an approach, and so here we're going to be at this presentation and storytelling. This will get mentioned just because we're also going to talk about the ask. Most nonprofits still today only attend to this. How are we going to find somebody? How are we going to ask? And really what we want to teach over and over again is that the process is always a relationship building process. Very rarely would someone, get a letter and send you $100,000 or even $10,000. It happens, but it's not the best business way to approach bringing money into your organization.
So that would be a total anomaly.
Yeah.
Right? It
yeah.
might happen, but it would be very rare, and it will,
Yeah, and
not reliable.
I actually just read a report about the increase of online giving, and which is up like 18% in 2016. And they could account for it wasn't even 1% of all the gifts that were over $1,000 that came in online. So those gifts, which is where everyone needs to be able to go to have stable, large donors in order to really sustain their nonprofit, those are still going to be built on this. But those smaller gifts that came in online might end up here, where then you're like thanking and finding out and developing, find out that, oh, maybe they are interested in sharing their time, talent, or treasure with you. Okay, I'm going to let you
So Libby just basically presented the slide for me, so thank you. The only thing I would add is I hadn't seen this wheel before meeting Libby and learning more about the Sanford Institute. I actually cut this out and put it on my bulletin board above my desk. I think it is a great reminder about the phases of the relationship with your donor or the other people that we are selling to. Let me. So I guess we don't have a clicker, but that's okay. So what are we selling? And it looks different depending on what our role is in the various organizations that we work for. Of course, we're asking for money. Our organizations cannot exist without the donations. But I can tell you, corporate engagement is a big area of interest for many nonprofits these days. So we're asking for partnerships with those corporate entities. My job of working with the media, I'm pitching stories. I'm looking for media groups to cover what we're doing at the Salvation Army. We're meeting potential members for our boards of directors and essentially selling them the opportunity, asking them to join us as a board member. And I also do a lot of communications and instruction to my colleagues and staff members, and in a way selling to them the information that they need to know. Any other ideas of how we're selling in our nonprofit organizations?
Anybody really concerned about using the term selling?
And Libby started to talk about this a minute ago, and how we are engaging with our constituents digitally. You know, we're communicating with them via email, we're using social media, we're sending video, and it is really important. These communication tools are the way, it's the wave of, I want to say the wave of the future, it's the wave of now. But remembering that that is not the way the relationships are formed. Relationships are formed in person, and it's that in-person relationship that is the way we sell, request money, do the pitch, communicate with our constituents. So the digital aspects are important, but it's not how we finalize the ask. We're going to start to talk a little bit about the actual presentation and the mechanics of that presentation. Recognizing that numbers are important in the nonprofit sector. How many people are we serving? How many people are we helping? How many people are impacted by the work that we're doing? How many visitors do we have to the Pacific Science Center? How many lives are we changing at Fair Start? I'm fortunate we have a complete statistics department at the Salvation Army that keeps track of all of these things for us. So I'm able to quickly focus on a region that I'm working in and gather those numbers. The donors and the people that we're communicating with want to know those numbers, but they also really want to hear the stories, and that's what we're going to start talking about, is the storytelling, and moving from just the stats and the numbers to really the stories of the lives that are impacted. I'm going to tell a story about a client at the Salvation Army who I had the pleasure of knowing. Her name is Sandy, and she was a homeless drug addict about 16 years ago, living on the streets of Seattle. And one day, I didn't know her then, one day she got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and she brought herself to our Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation Center, which is down in SoDo. You may or may not even realize it's there. And she went through the program. It is a no-cost program to the participants. She completed the program. It's a 6-month program, and she still, to this day, is living sober. She is working and has completely turned her life around. And the best part about it is that through getting sober, she has reconnected with her children. She had been completely out of touch with her high school age children. And that is a major benefit of her now living sober. So I like to tell that story, and I also like to share this picture of her because it's one thing to tell the story, but to share this photo, and of course I have permission to share the photo with you. It's just so inspiring to know that someone can go from living on the streets of Seattle under a bridge to have turned their life around. And those are the kinds of stories that donors love to hear. This is a great checklist for your presentations. It sounds so basic, but sometimes when you're in the hustle bustle of your everyday life or work, it's great to have this checklist in front of you before you go to meet with your donor, media rep, potential board member, corporate partner. I like this. It reminds me of a boss I had about 15, 20 years ago. His name is Greg Gibson, and he me one day, Laura, you need to go to the Greg Gibson School of Being Overprepared. And I remember him saying that to me on many occasions when you're prepping for a meeting or prepping for an event. This is so basic, but seriously, to have it and be overprepared so that when something happens, the meeting doesn't go the way you expected it to, whether it's a donor meeting or a corporate partner pitch, you are prepared. I think you've made this deck available. Are you going to make this deck available? Yeah.
And just maybe go over what all those things are.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. I mean, it's so who are we going to meet with? Let's just pretend let's just say for sake of example, it is a donor, right? So who are they and their contact information? What is the objective of the meeting? I mean, and we'll talk about how there are different phases of the relationship. So it might be a very early meeting where you're literally just telling them a little bit more about the organization and sharing some stories with them. Who is going to be there? Are they going to be alone? Are they going to have a colleague or a friend or a family member with them? Who are you taking? Are you taking your executive director? Are you taking a board member? Giving capacity. What is their giving capacity? Have you gone on Razor's Edge? Have they made a gift to your organization in the past? Have you checked them out on Wealth Engine? Who are they giving to? What types of organizations? And it's good to know that, from a dollars point of view, from an amount of time giving point of view, are they giving to other educational organizations? Chances are, if you're interested in pursuing that donor and they've never given to an educational organization, doesn't mean that they wouldn't, but if you find that all of their giving has been to social service programs, would they give to the Pacific Science Center? Who knows? Vice versa. Common interests. Do you know some of the people? Do you have anyone in common with them? Social media is great for checking people out, right? LinkedIn, I love some shared connections, relationships in common. Philosophy kind of goes back to their giving history. I mean, are they really focused on homelessness? And, I know a lot of I'm a big fan of Fair Start. I know a lot of people who come through Fair Start have been homeless. That, could really resonate with the donor. Is there any link or connection to the cause of the organization? What are you taking with you? I'm doing a presentation tomorrow with a representative from Patty Murray's office at one of our homeless shelters. I've already laid out on my desk my folder, my paperwork, everything I'm taking with me. It's already set, ready to go. And think about, again, being over-prepared. What could be an objection? Just thinking about what they could say, the questions they could ask. And then what are your expected results and your final call to action? And this is for every single meeting. Any questions? This concept I learned also from Stanford, units of conviction, which I've been doing all the time, we're all doing. Basically, I've called them success stories, but this is a good term, a unit of conviction. And the idea is, what is the story or the unit of conviction that you are going to share at this meeting? Like my story about Sandy and the woman who was homeless, went through the rehabilitation program, how she's turned her life around. Sometimes they're kind of like a little elevator speech. You have shared them in the past, it's kind of your go-to story. Of course, when you're meeting with someone and you're prepping for a big ask, you might not want to use this, you need to tailor your story according to what you know will resonate with them. We're going to go through the steps of creating a unit of conviction, but start to think about creating a unit of conviction for your own organization. And we're going to work on that, and we're going to share them. So start to think a little bit about, as we go through these steps, what could be a unit of conviction for your organization. These are the 5 parts of it, and we're going to go through each of them one by one. The feature that we want to highlight, I'm going to talk about another success story. I'm going to talk about another person who I've worked with. And her name is Natalie, and she went through our domestic violence program. Salvation Army has a domestic violence assistance program that includes a 24/7 hotline, legal counseling for people who are impacted by domestic violence, and we also have 2 confidentially located apartment buildings for emergency shelter and transitional shelter for families who are impacted by domestic violence. This woman in particular, Natalie, had been with her boyfriend, then husband, for a long time, and he was very attentive. And in time, that attentiveness turned into kind of possessiveness. She didn't even realize it was happening until one day, a few kids later, she was physically abused by him in front of her children. She came to us. She had no driver's license, no access to bank account, no job. She wasn't permitted to work outside of the house. She had nothing. And so we helped her rebuild her life with her 2 kids in our emergency shelter. She transitioned to transitional housing. She was able to get all the things that we all take for granted: identification, access to transportation, and then finally a job. And it is so amazing to know what she came from, that how she has been able to turn her life around.
How long did that take?
For, years, 2 years probably.
2 years.
We find that most people live in our emergency domestic violence shelter for up to 6 months, and then they can live in our transitional housing shelter for 2 years. So that's the feature. So we're sharing this information with a potential partner, donor. We need to transition. So first the feature, then the transition. So that transition phrase could be something like, I know that the issue of domestic violence is something that you hear about. Would you want to hear more? How can I answer more questions for you? And then we move to the benefit. With your help, we can save more lives. We can help more families survive domestic violence. So the feature, the transition, the benefit. And then the evidence. How many people did we help in our domestic violence program in the past year? Some of the testimonials from those people. We were able to put kids back in school, kids who hadn't been able to go to school. Once their lives became stable, we were able to help them get back into school. demonstrate that success, some samples and case histories. And this is one of the samples that I will often leave behind. I have several of these types of documents for various programs. It's just a sample. And then finally, the call to action, which is different depending on what you are pitching or selling. So to the donor, I know that this is an important area of service, that you care about it. Would you consider contributing $50,000 for us to make some improvements at our emergency shelter? Or if I'm speaking with the media, we're working on a capital campaign for this emergency shelter. Can you help us share this story so we can raise more money? So here they are again, the unit of conviction, the success story that leads to the request. Feature, transitional phrase, benefit, evidence, and a call to action. Any thoughts about a unit of conviction for one of your organizations? I'll keep that on the board. Do we want to take some time to think about it, to jot down some notes, to?
Yeah, or just even, what's a feature? I mean, most of people's organizations have many different things. So just think of a feature of your organization, or if you're not in one, sort of an organization that you know of, or, but something you want to highlight, because you can't highlight the whole thing.
Right.
Then the conversation's just about the organization. You're not connecting with the people that are being served, or the people who are being entertained, or the people who, right?
Well, I think especially, I don't know everything about all of the organizations that you work with, but I know a fair amount about Pacific Science Center. I've been there several times, and I am a supporter of Fair Start, so I know a little bit about that too. Maybe for Pacific Science Center, it is about the elementary school students who are visiting and the impact that it has on their curriculum and their education. So you're all in the fundraising department? Excuse me?
Individual giving.
Individual giving, okay. Well, so then you guys are pros at this. Well, I mean, it would be great if you could share an example of how you are using these tools, because I know you guys are successful in your fundraising. Yes.
Well, something we talk about a lot is access. In the last couple of years, we've had a big emphasis on access, and one of the programs that we started 2 years ago, last year, was our Family Access Member Program, where any family on public assistance, any type of public assistance, can get a full family membership, but for $19 instead of $119.
Wow.
And it gets like all the full benefits. They're not treated any differently. And they don't have to jump through a lot of hoops to get there. They just have to show any kind of card that proves they're in any other access program, and then it's done. And so we have lots of feature stories that have come out of that program from varying degrees, and that are incredibly powerful, that we use a lot to kind of really push the access initiative, because we just want everyone to have access to science education regardless of income or any kind of.
That is a fantastic program. I, of course, had no idea that you did that.
There you go.
We talk about that a lot because of that. And who covers that? Between $19 and $119. Those are from your donors. So
like increments of $100, basically, we can really scale it up, scale it down, depending.
right. So someone could donate $500 to help 5 families have membership to the Pacific Science Center.
So we use it through our annual fund all the way up into major gifts. So.
And what's the benefit to the donor?
I mean, it's most of our donors, it really is about access. And we just had a lunch yesterday where people said, oh, you should tell people about that when they're buying their memberships, because they might be able to buy their membership, but they really like the idea of able
Buy
to
two memberships, tack on $100.
We have these Eclipse kits that we did for the big Eclipse weekend, and they paid $200 for it because they were giving one to a family access member, and then it's like get one, so that's the helpful
Great.
program.
It actually seems like one of the few pitches I ever hear that could potentially interest the new philanthropists.
Good point.
The tech people who don't normally care.
I'm curious to know, after you did that, how much increase in terms of percentage did you saw in donations you received?
Well, last year was a big year. There's a lot of other factors.
Why was last year a big year?
The Science Center is in a very significant organizational transition, affecting many departments. So the fundraising team is really in a rebuilding era, so they have been successful. That's why we were sort of laughing. The Science Center historically has been successful in fundraising, but had a very sort of dramatic couple of years. We're now past that. But one of the things that's really nice thinking about the transitional phrase is that so many of the donors that we talk to start being donors because they bring their families to the Science Center. And so they know from their own children, their own grandchildren's experience, how important it is for their kids to.
Right, there's your transitional phrase.
And you can really go from that into, we want to make sure that every kid, regardless of background or circumstance, has the ability to access that.
Yeah, so that gets you to the benefit, sort of, as a community, how much better are we if all kids can access the Science Museum and grow in their scientific, all of those.
Complemented their STEM learning.
Right.
All of that. And then your evidence, you probably have plenty of stats, numbers that you can share, photos you can share.
And one of the stats I like is that our family access members come in Science Center more often than our
Oh,
wow.
That's great.
That's fantastic. And it's wonderful that you have that information available to you, right? I mean, it's great when you anecdotally think it's happening, but when you can prove it, you have the numbers to prove it, going back to what we were talking about before, and how those stats are important. They're not the full presentation. You need to have the stories to back it up, because the stories are what really can impact the donor. But it's nice when you do have firm numbers.
Anybody else? You got a Fair Start story?
Yeah, we probably have lots of them. Yeah, I would say an example is that most people know, but we get people, the one denominator is people must be poor. They can be homeless, they can be, coming out of prison. We have a relationship, they can be coming out of addiction, and they come, and what we're known for, it's a culinary training program where they learn cooking skills. But I think even more important than learning cooking skills is gaining back their self-confidence. We have an important component, which is life skills, and learning your own value, learning to work with people from all different walks of life. Not someone may be poor now, they may have been a high-powered attorney at one time before they, got addicted to drugs. So working with all different sorts of people, and in a kitchen, it's very tight. So you learn respect because you respect the chefs. You learn teamwork, and you learn kind of, if you've been homeless, how to live in a place again, because a lot of people have forgotten that. And I'd say the benefit is that out of our adult culinary program, 90% of our graduates get jobs within 3 months, which is great. And after 6 months, probably 75% are still working, which that's still a pretty good percentage because our program is only 16 weeks, so 4 months. And these people, our students are really, really transforming their lives. And you see them on day one and you see them at graduation, and oftentimes you don't recognize their personality, they just blossom.
You are giving me a great idea right now, that photo, because I see that too. I see the people who come into the shelter on day one. Our shelters that are working with case management, we have shelters that are completely, someplace to sleep that's out of the elements. But I'm talking about the shelters that are that involve case management. And when you look at seeing photos of them, I've never thought about the idea. This would be great for part of the evidence. Photo on day one, photo on 16 days later at graduation. 16 weeks later at your graduation.
And another way that that's useful is the benefit is to them first, but the benefit to all of us is important too. So I'm using more and learning more about, instead of having the smiling after picture, to start with a donor with how it starts, because there I can feel I want to help. If I only see the happy picture, I'm like, well, I guess you're taking care of it. In the sense that and so, this whole, and look at it, you'll get solicitations in the mail because it's holiday time, and look at how they're presented. And so if it looks too good, then I don't see a need. I want to know that you need me. And that's part of that. The benefit is also that the benefit is your contribution does this to affect our community, to affect the lives of these people, to build the restaurant industry, all of those things. And it connects people with this individual whose life was changed and points to how your life can be changed by participating in this.
And it's interesting too, because I'll say many of the adults and even some of the youth that come out of our programs, their biggest thing, once they somehow make it or have a good job where they feel they've been, graduated for a while, and we try to track people, years down, is that the biggest thing is they want to give back. They not only want to give back to Fair Start, they want to give back to whatever kind of programs they, came out of, whether it was addiction or, poverty, and they want to help other people because they've been there. And I think that's really a benefit to the community. Absolutely. Because you're creating kind of these philanthropically, whether it's money or time, people to make the community better.
Right. So they develop social responsibility. It's sort of like, oh, this is what it means to be part of a wider community.
And there's no cost for someone to participate in a Fair Start program, correct?
No.
So there you go with your, again, being able to quantify.
They pay nothing.
Right. So then, but the cost must be significant for the organization, for each person that goes through the program.
Right, because we supply Goodwill vouchers. Salvation Army is one of our partners too.
Yeah.
And the Goodwill vouchers to every student. We provide bus tickets. We provide housing. And we rely on partners in the community and donors to, allow us to do that by donating money for services that they offer.
So a donor could, in fact, going back to what we were talking about, scaling up the, it's very quantifiable. So we know it costs $100 to fund a family in the Access program. I know what your cost is. I'm sure it's much more than $100 for someone in your program.
Right, we have broken down.
But you could, in your pitch or your sell, help us put 10 people through the program this year. Change 10 lives.
Right.
The other thing that we focus on in our storytelling, which is a little bit of a shift, we always talk about changing lives. We're trying to focus more on the work that the individual invests to change their own life. So it's not, yes, we are changing lives, but really giving credit to the individual who is working so hard to change their situation.
Right. And when people can see themselves as a partner to that individual who's changing their lives, rather in some ways than a partner to you, yes, the organization, then their connection is stronger.
A lot of that is in the discovery on how, how does that particular donor, what are they thinking? How do they feel? Do they have an affinity to science, or do they have an affinity to access? So it really is part of your discovery and your ongoing relationship with the donor or potential partner.
Something that I found when I was talking to a donor recently about this is I think it's kind of like there's some donors like to help people help themselves, which is kind of what you're talking about. Is that sometimes I will share the story of the family access member that then they get off public assistance and then they're really excited to buy their full membership the next year because they're really proud.
And you have evidence of that?
Yeah.
That's
fantastic.
fantastic.
We have testimonials to that effect. And so that is another thing, depending on the donor, that is like really empowering because it's, like that same deal where it's like, it's just for a time, like we all go through rough patches. We don't want our kids to suffer during rough patches, but then they bring themselves back up out of homelessness or some other situation, and they're still valued that membership for them. So,
yeah, that's great. Any other stories? Were you involved with nonprofits in Kentucky?
Absolutely.
Does a story come to mind?
I think, but they're not social service. They've not focused on giving back, and for the most part are quite well funded. So it's kind of a different and difficult pitch in that respect, and it is really based on deepening existing relationships around the interest and commitment to the institution, making sure that it maintains its status.
And that is, having come from the arts, I can relate to that. There are, I'll just give the example of the theater I worked for in Cleveland. I started my career at the Cleveland Playhouse, very similar to the Seattle Rep. And that organization has been around for 100 years. And there are people who love that organization. And they like to hear the stories about the kids at school groups coming to the theater who may not otherwise have the opportunity, but they love the organization and they give because they want to support that organization. They have for many years, hopefully will continue. But I can understand what you're saying. It's a affinity for the organization.
Right, and it's all kind of deepening the existing relationship. And I think the tools there are as much providing access for the donor to the institution and entree into behind the scenes and welcoming them into the family.
Yeah, and once they're in the family, though, if you want to continue to be in the family, you're going to start to feel this, I want to make sure this is here, I want to make sure this new program, those things. So they're not a new donor, but these features and benefits are still important for them to continue to hear about and match with what their interest is in continuing the organization.
Right, I think it's capitalizing on the interest.
Yeah.
Kind of reporting back that yes, we're doing the things that you care about.
Right, yeah, and that you've invested in. Because they're investors. All donors are, if you use the sales model and business model, the sales feed the organization, so, and in some way, they are investing in that organization. They want to know what the return on their investment is.
Yeah. Well, I suspect you were also working with your donors for planned gifts and legacy gifts. That is something that when someone has been with you for such a long time and they have such an affinity for the organization, taking it to the next level and thinking about the future when they're not going to be here anymore.
That's right, and also, as you know, particularly with educational institutions, if you have a small donor over many years, these are people who are not able to give substantially during their lifetimes,
right,
but are able and are open to doing that as a planned gift.
Right.
So they typically are smaller donors, but they're longer donors.
Right.
Frequent and for a long period of time.
We're gonna break for a little bit so you can get a little bit of lunch in about 5 minutes, so I don't know where you
Okay,
are.
well, this is actually a really good stopping point
Mhm.
after we're finished with the unit of convictions, because we're going to talk a little bit more about the ask
When we come back.
when we come back.
Great.
So,
yeah.
Getting up to number 7.
Yes, I can probably fill in the extra time with my organization.
Oh, great.
We've never fundraised before. We have no history of it. It's a building owned by the city, which turns a lot of people off as far as we want to do a capital campaign for improvements to the building. But they say, well, why doesn't the city just do that?
Right, I'm paying taxes.
Right. And, but it's not really in the city's interest to do the kinds of improvements that we need for function.
Mhm.
And so there's the capital campaign, then there's, we do occasional grants for equipment and programs and stuff like that, but it's the operational, we have just no clue how to do annual for operations.
Mhm. Great. So what is the building? What is the building?
So it's Carco Theater in Renton.
Uh-huh. And so is it a historic, I mean, does it have a,
It was built in 1970.
Mhm.
It's Bauhaus.
Mhm.
So there's, there is an actual architectural element to it. It's 300-seat theater, very robust as far as what it can do. It does not have a fly loft, which is another thing that we'd like to do a capital campaign for. We've already gotten the design done for both the lobby expansion and the fly loft. And we've got about 150,000 so far of the money that we need to raise. Do you have a board? We are in transition to a new board.
Okay.
But the new board is actually very exciting.
Great.
And on board with doing fundraising. So now I'm just sending like boards on fire and boards of gear training to the ones who haven't had any fundraising.
Right. Well, and as we do workshops, tell them to come, and because we have a campus in Renton, so in December I'm doing workshops in Renton.
Signed up for it.
Great. So good. Good. But here's a question: when we look at features and benefits, what's the benefit to a donor that the city does own it? As opposed to it being a negative, what's the benefit that the city?
They actually are the ones maintaining the building.
Okay.
And that they are putting some money and efforts towards the building. They have done some improvements in the past couple of years.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, so in a sense, you've got this obstacle that of people's perception.
Right.
But you have to get to the benefit. The benefit is it's going to be here, it's being taken care of to a certain extent, and we're being offered the opportunity to make it flourish. Because a nonprofit doesn't have to own it. I mean, it's the same thing as, some of the shelters, right? They're in places that you don't own.
Right, I mean,
You a city hall.
This is a
Right,
perfect
yeah.
example. So I was last night, until 8 o'clock at night with a reporter from the Seattle Times at one of our emergency shelters, which is in City Hall. City Hall hires us to manage and operate an emergency shelter, and it's year-round, and it's 75 max on the ground. So one could argue, well, it's in City Hall's paying you to do it. But there's the kind of the brick and mortar of it, and they are paying for our staff, but we're working on bringing in food for these people. We're working on developing a system where they can store their belongings throughout the day, which is a real challenge for homeless people. So there's so much more to it than just, yes, the city is hiring us to do it, and that's wonderful. But I was going to say, maintenance is such an issue for physical buildings. So I think it's actually like going back to what you were saying with a benefit. The maintenance is probably mostly funded by the city because and so the donor's money is not going to maintenance, it's going to improvements, like this capital campaign.
Yeah. All right, well, let's take a quick break. We have some lunch out there. We'll just bring it back in here and kind of have a little bit of a working lunch.
Really, the Seattle Center doesn't.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
They're.
Hello. A little different than the way you look at presentations for schools.
But when you think about it for business,
Well, the city of Seattle. The office is 6 years now. That's how the is. Part of the state.
So it's a little different than how to do a presentation for a class. Right, but it's still the feature benefit, some of those ideas are still there. This is more towards figure out working. Because it's not about a class, it's about persuading.
No, I
asking
actually,
people.
it's just teacher. Kind of trying to figure out how,
Right.
How do you
Right, which is really the same thing, because the goal is, there's something you want from us. They have to be able to connect and decide that they want to participate. In nonprofits, it's more about the sales for the money for the work.
Right.
This is about the sale for, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So have some lunch, sure.
Yeah, we're working hard on what you're, they're right down the street.
Yeah, you have a lot of money.
Developing a relationship with.
Yeah.
so where were you before?
You know, I was in Kansas. I can't really start. If you're looking for. Yeah. They're becoming a pretty big firm, but very focused on small and size. Capital consulting firms, they will actually go down. So you just have people that do.
I don't.
So. That is the thing.
No.
Oh, that's interesting.
He was, I was on the Access for All. I've been working on it for 7 years, trying to get it passed. He was actually looking at the holding back. And, so I've got no idea about it. But he was just in my, he was just in my career the other night.
Yeah.
Giving a speech.
He, he's problematic. But he's also, I've seen him in building for
I think the engagement, the user experience was appropriate for all things that.
Yeah.
This was sort of flooding us.
That was, yeah, that was.
You know,
Fair start is one of them.
Oh, they are?
I've been on a
piano.
Yeah, that's, and they do, we have them here for something.
I used to work.
Oh, yeah?
The interesting thing I think is, I think we should be cheaper.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
because we're not.
Yeah.
When people say to me, well, I want to start a program, that's when you go start a business. No, I want to start a nonprofit. A nonprofit.
Yeah, like our friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're like,
Yeah, this is. No, I mean, I just wanna help people, you know, and I don't wanna get profit. Because if you have profit, you have to make decisions. Every moment, because then
That's so funny. People, I mean, I think it's getting better. Nonprofits, yeah, you have to run it as a business, and I think for years, they were not very much affected. So many people don't run it as a business.
And they fail at a higher rate than small businesses.
Ah.
I'm a big fan of Hair Star. My husband and I are daughters.
Oh, you are?
My husband's good friends with Matt Green.
Oh, gee, yeah.
And they play soccer together, so.
I really, he is, and he's been a yeah, I mean, he's one of the. About, well, it'll be 3 years in February, which it's not that hard.
Yeah.
But,
Well, and there's been so much, oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry, so much happening with your start this days.
oh my God, it's just with them. I mean, that was great shift. This was, well, they needed, yeah, Mary's,
Yeah.
honestly. Here's the thing, because it has such good information.
Well, it's a win, right? I mean, I appreciate the way you're it's like, you know, you're fighting hospitals for their,
Right.
for their campus.
Right, I mean, it's cool and it's all the equipment and service, but they're also, you know, oh, they think that someone was saying, they read something where a percentage of you know, gifts, like, it would,
Or KU.
and it was KU,
Or, it's University of Washington.
that they give to nonprofits. And so, you know, they give us $1 million, you know, several million excited. And the big picture, it's just, and they get so much.
But yeah, then there's.
They gotta start somewhere, and, you know,
Oh, yeah,
so, well, look at there, I mean, it's, you know, I wish that there was more for all, but it's small stuff, what they're doing is.
at least they, and they hired, Alice Shower,
Right.
which, I mean, that right there, she comes from nonprofits, and I knew her, I used to be in town for a long time. So, housing, there was the housing. Oh, wow. She, coming from a nonprofit, they're recognizing that they need someone who thinks, you know, in philanthropic terms versus, you know, strictly numbers and business. So that's, so I think it takes a while, but I think they're getting there. But I was gonna say, I just interviewed one of our grads who came from the Salvation Army, which was interesting, because he went through your art program. Yeah, he had a drinking addiction.
What makes it very interesting charter because I think broadcasting from this is
More traditional.
they granted out each year.
Really? That are
If they
salvation army or just in general? I mean,
So in
Well,
creating
I mean, we only
profit,
take 21 bucks.
So all music organizations in town, and so they made a charter that any profit just came out as over a certain percentage. Out. And they, in their second year, granted out more than $25,000, which forgot it, that had it. They were so successful.
So we went through the ARC and so we did like 14 or 16 or 20 days at our homeless shelter.
yeah, and I think, yes. And I just.
They only have one person.
And mention, yeah, I should, you should give me your.
Oh, you didn't?
You should just write your email.
Well, let me see if I have it. Let me just check.
But, yeah, and we definitely mentioned
that there were like 100 and some voicemail messages.
So Salvation Army is
couple
mentioned
hundred
twice
email messages.
That's nice of you.
in our latest newsletter.
And so I just attended to them and, within the first year, we had doubled the revenue. It's amazing what they-
The year before,
Fantastic.
we had maybe like 600 Did you do it for 4 months?
But you're like the world's longest email that's okay.
But you've been there
7 years.
Oh, seven, that's right.
It's a great place to work. I'm so sloppy.
What's your, did you not bring in the comments?
I know. Sorry.
What kind of, you should be arrested by the business police.
It just means US West, so we kind of divide the organization.
Oh.
So we have kind of like half of the Western United States and they're kind of.
Well, I'm gonna break something out.
So we have organizing the, excuse me, organization, sorry.
Excuse me, it's okay.
Start thinking about your examples of persistence, because I know some of you have them. We're going to talk about it.
So who's ever asked anybody for money? Actually, like in a meeting? Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4. Was it as terrible as you thought it would be?
No, because that's what I do.
Okay, go back in time, go back in time. Go back in time, before you just started doing it.
I mean, we don't really ask people for money unless they're ready to be asked, so once you learn that.
What do you do? There you go.
There you go.
And that's why, like, for me, like, it's never been an issue.
Right.
You're never just like stopping someone across the face.
Right, right. So that's a plan in our eyes.
Well, do you find sometimes that other people in the organization, hopefully not your leadership, don't fully understand that there is an art to what you're doing, right? You don't just pick up the phone and call. I experienced it in my own world of marketing and PR. Like, oh, such and such media group is doing a story on another organization. Call them and see if they'll do one on you. That's just not the way it works, right? Oh, so gave, Amazon just gave a substantial gift to Fairstar. Someone call Amazon. Right? It's just so, but that's an extreme example,
But it does.
But it brings you maybe feel a little bit of that.
But it is real. I mean, how many people do you know in your own life who say to you, well, get the Gates Foundation to give you money? Like, they have absolutely no idea who you are, and they have no idea what the Gates Foundation is, as if they just have a little hotline you call. Right.
They got somebody at the front door just dealing.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. Yeah.
I think something that's been helpful for me when talking to people that aren't fundraisers is I talk about fundraising like matchmaking, so that you have to align interests and mission. And it isn't just you walk up to someone and ask them for money, because that doesn't work ever. And so, the people that we're asking are people who usually self-select. People like, any find new donors, and like that's kind of a myth. Like they're in your membership base. Like they've already selected to be part of what you do.
Right.
They're not like new to you. They might be a new donor and that they haven't given a gift over their membership before, but you don't just like get a list from some random other place and decide that these are our people now.
Right,
so,
and get the donor list from Fairstar and hope that they'll all give to the
Right.
Science Center, right? It goes back to what we're talking about with aligning their the mission and what are their interests and what are their passions and is there a connection? So, yeah.
I had been researching Target for months, and I mentioned it to my executive director, and he went and just did it. Just went and met with them.
And how did that work for that?
And it totally burned my Target. And I was so mad. But I'm going to still approach them again and start reestablishing. They're just too valuable to Target.
That's so frustrating.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he's going away.
That executive, we were getting ahead of ourselves, so that executive director could have been part of the ask eventually. I mean, I think it's wonderful sometimes you take in your ED or you take in someone who is building a program for the Science Center, or you take perhaps someone who's been successful with Fair Start, take them, help them, take them with you, and they can help you with the ask, just for, just to be part of the example of what your organization's working toward. But it has to be timed perfectly, choreographed, like you said, with matchmaking. So we're going to talk a little bit more. We've moved from storytelling and thinking about what potential objections could be. And we're going to get into the ask, or in the kind of the business world of selling, closing. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the persistence and the importance of the repeated relationship and how that is sometimes maybe the first time you make a request, the answer might be no. But it may not be no the second time. Or maybe it is no the second time, but now, of course, we're not being ridiculous with pursuing something that is not going to happen. It is the art of being persistent without being annoying, of course. This is, I love this graph. This is another one, Libby introduced me to this graph. This is another one I think I'm going to put on my desk. Because I think, and we were talking about, this is the right side, right? This is the traditional side, or what many people think is how you do what you do, right? You meet and you're quickly asking. And some of you, I think, in this room know that this is how it really works. And the amount of time that you need to spend on developing a relationship and building trust. Learning about the donor or the potential partner, asking questions, listening to what they're saying, talking about the benefits what we were talking about earlier, sharing the benefits, and then finally getting to the ask. And this is not, just to clarify, this is not in one meeting. This is over time, right? If you look back at a major ask, I'll give an example. I'm not going to name names, but we did just, as part of a capital campaign, we're able to secure $1 million gift, and it was managed by one of my colleagues who's in our major gifts department. This donor has been a friend of the Salvation Army since before I started working there. That's 7 years. Goes back. I've seen and heard stories of this donor with our organization 20 plus years ago. The ask was just made this past year, 2007, in summer of 2017, for $1 billion. And they said yes. That's great. So you think about 20 years in our relationship with this person, how much time is spent on building trust, and the ask was a very small part of it. In fact, when I heard the stories about it, I was amazed at how small it was and how it happened in a meeting that probably took less than an hour. But there were years of developing a relationship. So this is another good one where we talk about our leadership that maybe sometimes doesn't understand how much time it takes to invest in a relationship and a donor. Lots of great kind of little tidbits of information for thinking about when you're making the ask. And this is certainly a good one to keep in mind. 3 C's when you're working with a potential partner or donor. We talked a little bit about this in the past today. What's their capacity? Do you have any idea? Have you checked them out on Wealth Engine? Have they given to other organizations? What have they given to your own organization? Like you were saying, and I'm sorry I forget your name already, someone who has given perhaps a small gift every year or every quarter for many, many years. That can give you a pretty good indication of what they might be thinking about for the future. And their concern, how do they feel about your organization or your mission? And their connection to it. Programming, this is a great thing, we were talking about this a minute ago, how you transition from the program staff to the fundraising staff. And how that really gives you a little bit of an advantage for sharing. I mean, we all share stories as fundraisers, but when you can talk about the people you've actually worked with as part of the programming staff, you're really great. Capacity, concern, and connection. It's so important to do these things in person. We talked earlier today about the emails and the digital communications, but really it's the one-on-one, in-person, face-to-face meetings that are so important when you're making a request of someone. And these are some good questions to ask yourself before you go to that meeting. Again, being prepared, being over-prepared. What inspires or motivates the donor or the partner? Why us? Why now? And what of the work that you're doing is the most interesting to them? And this goes back to some of these organizations that are so multifaceted. There's so much happening at Pacific Science Center. What is it that they're interested in? Are they interested in STEM education? Are they interested in access? Are they, do they love dinosaurs? Do they want to share that? You must have some donors who love dinosaurs. And how do they make gift decisions? We need, particularly our donors who give significant amounts of money. It's usually a family decision for them. I can think of 2 donors, the one I mentioned before, and another major donor, who have said to us, I need to discuss it with my family. I'm going to discuss it with my children. So knowing that that's important to them, you can make that part of your conversation. And where does our organization stand on our list of priorities? Hopefully near the top if we're getting this far along with them. And how do they again, these are all the items that you can think about before while you're having a conversation, while you're meeting this donor. These are good examples of questions to ask them when you're meeting with them. Why do they care about the program? How do they like to make a difference in their life? What other programs do they care about? And again, like I said, we know some of our donors. We know that there's certain times of year they might like to make a gift. We know some of them like to involve their family. So just be prepared for that conversation. Everything you do is working toward that final request. Lots of prep work, again, like that inverted triangle. So much time in advance in relationship and in preparation. Do you have any examples of long time relationships that finally led to an ask? I don't need to pick on the spot, but I'm kind of guessing that you do.
You know, it would be science center.
I have one.
You have one, Libby?
So, many of you may know that in Finney Ridge, there's the Finney Neighborhood Association. Been there forever and ever. Those were buildings that were owned by the school, the city, the school department, and they had been able to do some changes, but they got to a place where they were able to arrange for the property to be sold to the Finney Neighborhood Association, mostly because the rest of the community did not want that huge piece of property to be developed. So there was a capital campaign to finish up part of the purchase, but also the original building was built in 1908, and it had no elevator in it. And so a big part of it was how were they going to be able to make the building accessible. So I came into the campaign to work as a major gifts person about halfway through, and it will be meaningful to most of you to know that I started at the very beginning of 2008. Mm-hmm. If you remember 2008, yeah. Doing a capital campaign was like, now they made all their money, it took an extra year, but still it was, it was a critical time. And the development person and some of the staff people had a year and a half or so before that come to find out that one of the Norcliffe family, which is one of the big families in town, connected with the Norcliffe Foundation and PACCAR and all this other stuff, that the granddaughter had a great-grandchild in one of the Finney neighborhood daycare centers. And they just came to know it, and they had gotten to know the granddaughter, right? It's sort of just, and she loved it, and she told them over the time, she said, I've talked to my grandmother, and she's thrilled to know how well this is going. So now we have a connection, a real connection, potentially, to the grandmother, who has a connection to the big foundation, and personally is quite wealthy herself. But we hadn't gotten to a place where we knew we could ask. But we did know, and she had been connected enough that the development person had said, I think why don't we meet with her to kind of start to do this, and find out some things. And so we couched it in a question that we really did have. See, you don't want to manipulate anybody, right? You don't want to make things up. And the question was, we're about ready to start looking at granting organizations, and you're part of the philanthropic granting foundation community here in Seattle, and we'd like your advice. Would you be willing to meet with us? So, and the short thing that I always go by is, if you ask for advice, you'll probably get money. If you ask for money, you'll probably get advice. So it's something to keep in mind. So we met with her. We had a great conversation. She was telling us a little bit about, the different foundations and all those sort of things. And then as we got talking, we were just going to leave it there. We didn't plan anything else for that meeting until she said, well, you are going to apply to the Norcliffe Foundation, aren't you? And we're like, oh, well, yes, actually you are on our list. And, we want to confirm that what we're doing, our campaign matches how you see things and how you want to be involved. Oh yes, I think it would. And we actually also knew that the way that family foundation works, the family members rotate on who's on the board, and she was that year. So we also knew that. So this is that research kind of thing. And so we said, well, great. Do you think this is the right time for us to make that grant request? Yes, I do. Well, we have a lot of different ideas. Would you be willing to share what an appropriate amount of request should be? I was thinking $50,000. She was thinking.
Did you say that to her?
No. We didn't say anything. We left it with her, and she said, "Oh, you should ask for $500,000." Wow. And we sat there very like, "Wow, that would be so fabulous." We don't really. We know that this is your suggestion. We're not saying, oh, great, we have it, although we're pretty sure we did. But we left it at that. And so we talked a little bit more about their form and, exactly how they wanted it, when should we send it, all those kind of things. And so we were like, she said, well, we're going to meet in a month, so send it in now, right? So 6 weeks later, there's a check for $500,000. Now that started with somebody on the staff connecting this granddaughter and great-granddaughter to that family.
That's key.
That was the key. That was the key. It never would have happened if and so that's part of my pitch to all nonprofits, that philanthropy is for everybody's job. And it wasn't so much that she knew that they would give money, but it was just she recognized the family name or something that kind of let people know that. Then the other piece of that meeting, because we hadn't gotten to the place where we were going to sort of decide about some individual gifts, her grandmother said, and you will be making an individual ask as well. And we're like, well, we'd like to. And she said, well, let me know. So this is a person who knows this whole world so well, right? But it was that experience of walking through a process, not getting too anxious, not being too fearful, but walking through the steps so that when we got there, as you well stated, when you get there, you pretty well know that it's going to happen, because you wouldn't do all these things unless, if you got all the signals that said no, that's not where their interests are, then you're going to be grateful for the $500 they send every year and leave it alone. So that's my example of sort of, we knew what our purpose was. We had Ann and I had talked. Probably we had 2-hour meetings to plan this hour conversation with her. Who was going to say what? Who was going to show this? So that we were prepared. And that made it easier for me and for Ann to be ready. And it made all the difference, because we kind of had our plan, and it went faster than our plan was. That was great, but if it didn't, we knew what the next step was going to be. So that's my story.
You said something that reminds me of another little tidbit that I'd like to keep in mind. You said, what did you say? Everyone is responsible for philanthropy.
Yeah. It's my big pitch these days, the culture of philanthropy. Everyone is responsible
for philanthropy. And a lot of people, a lot of your colleagues may think that they are not part of that department, they don't have anything to do with it. But it reminds me of one of my bosses many years ago said to me, every employee is a deputy of public relations. And this is before social media, but it rings true now. Mm-hmm. But every representative is, every employee represents the organization. That makes them a PR representative. And certainly now, what you just said is also true. Everyone can contribute to philanthropy. Recognizing a connection, knowing someone, hearing something, reading something.
Well, coming from the program staff, so you can speak about the program, and you also connected to. So you could go speak to the rest of the program staff and say, "Let me tell you how you can help with philanthropy," because I was a program person, and now this is what I do. So it's a pitch. It's a way to. And most people get pretty panicky. They think, I'm not asking you to ask for money. I'm not asking anybody of those people to do that. I'm saying, if someone talks to you about being interested in knowing more, do you know how to connect them with someone? Just that. Yes, I do know the person you can talk to. Let me get your email and I'll get you that information. Then you've contributed to the whole endeavor.
Or simply just keeping their eyes and ears open, yeah. Right? That's great. A little bit more about the mechanics of that meeting, which I think Libby just outlined perfectly, and keeping in mind personalizing your language, your engagement with them, using their names, using their families' names if you know that that's important to them, thanking them for their past support, thanking them for the differences that they've made in their community. establishing the case for support for the specific task that you're going to make, and telling them about the impact it's going to have on the people who they're helping, or the organization that they're helping. And then making a very specific, tailored recommendation. Now, it just so happened that the family Libby just spoke with, she told them what to ask for. But if you don't have that luxury, making it very specific. We would like you to make a donation of $50,000 so that we can improve, we can provide family memberships for many families in King County who are on assistance. And what will that mean? With that $50,000, we'll be able to help X number of families. And at 2.5 kids per family, that's that many more children who are going to be able to visit the Science Center. So you've done it, you've asked it, and then I think some of you know what to do next. Don't say anything else. Just relax and be quiet for a minute. It's a lot for them to take in. They knew you were going to ask something, right? If they had no idea you were going to make an ask, then something went wrong. They should know that you're going to make an ask. But at some point, you need to be quiet and let them think about it. Let them process what you've done, what you've asked of them. And think about your nonverbals as well, your body language. Libby provided this photo.
I didn't think. I mean,
think about it the next time you make an ask that little girl.
Yeah.
You must, I'm sure you practice this on a regular basis, those of you who are longtime fundraisers.
I don't have a problem with this personally.
Yeah,
it's
this is
never
about-
become a thing, but it's always a thing with executive leaders.
No, I
I've
agree.
never ever had an update, and I have to practice with them.
Right.
Especially if they're going to be the one making the ask.
Right, if you're taking them along and they're the ones who are literally making the ask, right? That's a very good point.
Yeah, we actually were talking to our CEO yesterday, and he was very proud of himself because in a conversation, he waited and did exactly this, and someone was sort of having a little bit of trouble articulating themselves, and they just did that. She was like, "This is what I'm going to do." And he was like, "You're so proud of me." Yes, we are very proud of you.
It's hard because you are managing your anxiety. You've just put yourself out and asked, and most people, it leaves you vulnerable.
Right, it seems like an eternity, but it's really not, right? It's probably 2 minutes, maybe less by the time they start to say something. But it's also respect for them. Let them think about what they want to say. Chances are the request you've made is significant. And they need to think about it. And they probably will tell you that they need to think about it more and we'll get back to you, but that initial ask, I think it's really most respectful to just give them time to process it.
And what would you say if they said, I need to get back to you with an answer?
Most people probably do, don't they?
All right. What do you say at that point?
That's great. Is there anything that I can provide more information about that would help with?
Right. That's what else can I provide you? But what else? There's a key thing that you would also do. If I
establish a way to follow up.
Right.
Yeah.
So you establish this. It's not an open-ended. Yeah, I'll get back to you. Right. You want to be able to set. Great. And what else can I provide for you? And when would be a good time to get back to you? And so you get it to land, because otherwise it could be the brush off, right? I'll get back to you. I mean, how many of you have said, do you want to go out for something? You go, well, I'll get back to you. And it means I'm not going to do it.
Right, so you say, and they say, let me get back to you. When will that be? When can I follow up with you? When can I give you more information? What other information do you need? And so it's clearly established what the next steps are. So there's no miscommunication. That person might think, let me get back to you in a month. You'd like to follow up in a week with any, answering their questions. And then of course the thanking them. The thanking is so crucial all along the way, but certainly thank you for this meeting. Thank you for considering this. Thank you for giving us your time. Just one more review of what we've been talking about and the differences between having a relationship with someone and not really having a relationship with someone who you're making an ask of. Right? So having a relationship, talking about the challenges, the problem that they're going to help solve, talking about the people who need help, talking about, again, what we talked about, the person on day one, not necessarily the person on graduation day, but the person on day one along the way, and how that gift or that donor or that partner is helping those people through that program. Whereas the final, which is great, but not really, like you said, it's over and done with, why do you need my help?
And we need both. I just got, I know I'm collecting my things that are coming in the mail. I always look at them. I think I should call these people and tell them they shouldn't send things to me because I'm analyzing it. But it's that sense of some requests actually are more reporting. This is what we've done, this is what you've done, this is, and kind of the story's completed. So I don't see myself as someone who's going to contribute to make a difference. I want to know what isn't being done, what isn't being done and why my help is important. And then I do want to know, and that's a whole other workshop. That's next month.
In my role, we call this donor impact.
Right.
So what is the donor's impact? How are they? They're ongoing donors, and what have they done? And so this is basically our report of impact back to them, with the idea that hopefully they will continue to give, because there will always be so many more of these.
Right. And interestingly enough, if you think in the arts, let's think of the symphony, right? Okay, the person who needs help, right? The symphony, some of our arts organizations function in a different way, right? The main source of donations comes from the recipients of the organization, right? The people who go to the symphony. So in human services, the people who give are not the people who are, we're asking you to help the people in Salvation Army, but you're not a recipient, right? So in some organizations, it's different. Right? So even still, there's always something that's unsolved or more that needs to be done or and the symphony needs to be able to do this, so it needs help with all these things. And whatever is being pitched, it's a situation that's not complete. So, but when you report, then this is what we were able to do. Because I want to give, some fundraiser a long time said to me, people do not buy lawnmowers. They buy short grass. You want short grass, and you go out to find the best mechanism for getting your short grass. And so, and it's a problem, right? My grass, my grass is growing. I can't get it to be the way I want it to. And so you go to find a solution to that. And that's true in any kind of organization. But it is true that in many arts and some universities in some ways, where the donors aren't necessarily the recipients of them. They may have been a long, long time ago, but they aren't maybe today. And so it's looking at who is the recipient, who is the donor, and then being able to say, there still is something that's unresolved, that isn't complete, that still needs to be done. And I need you to help me do it. Would you help me do it? Right? Yeah, of course, right, yeah, of course. So,
But one of the hardest arguments to make is we've lost funding because of cutbacks on the state level.
right. Yeah, so I wouldn't,
That's a tough one.
depending upon what kind of organization is, the problem is not that we lost the funding, the problem is these are the things we still need to do. So I wanna,
Which is overhead.
yeah, which is, and that's a whole other conversation because,
And that's so not sexy.
well, no, but more and more nonprofits are understanding that their programs, so the people they serve or whatever they're doing, the quote overhead is actually, if overhead didn't get taken care of, there would be no programs. So it's an accounting thing that has to do that. There's still regulations that say you have to present that, but more and more nonprofits are finding a way to share their budgets in a way that don't separate these things. So people see that the staffing costs or keeping the lights on or all those things are absolutely 100% necessary to the efforts that are helping people. And so it becomes a way in which we talk about it. So I'm very big at like not uttering overhead as a, right. And that doesn't mean it always works, okay? But it is a real issue for nonprofits.
Because connecting with donors is often around a very specific need, and that's where their funds are
Right, but,
increasingly going to be directed.
okay, but let's use the example of the science center. Okay? So the specific thing is how can we provide memberships for people who are on access, who have needs around that. A membership
Is unrestricted.
is, no, it is unrestricted, but it has tied to it all these other things. If you have a program and you give it to the program, that's still lots of unrestricted money. All the pens and papers that go into that program, and so it's finding the way to talk about it and to help donors understand that unrestricted does not mean willy-nilly I'm going out for dinner. It means this is the money that we need for the staff to be able to do the program, all of those kind of things. And that if people want to give for a very specific thing, that it actually matches your mission, right? That's the other thing, is that people can get very excited about developing a donor who they know is going to be very restrictive. Well, it might not serve the organization. So there's this dance that has to go on to say, if you give it this way, this is what we can do. If you give it this way, this is what we can do. So it's a matter of knowing, because there's the stipulations around restrictive gifts have a bunch of flexibility in them that we have to educate our donors about.
I don't know if there's a pattern in this, but I'm thinking about it. A couple of donors that I worked with since they offer, who asked a lot of questions about overhead.
Right.
And in digging more, I learned that they really just wanted to understand the financials.
Right.
And how, an organization that's so heavily dependent on income was going to survive in the long run. And we wound up just getting really in the weeds, and we talked about multi-year budgeting, and that was sort of the evidence that they needed to know that we were planning how we were going to use their contribution wisely, and it wasn't just going to fill some invisible hole.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you all did just fabulously to support what is this donor really asking, and are they a person who really wants to get into the weeds? And they did. So you went, okay, let's go into the weeds. We'll show it to you. We're transparent. We're not just sort of sitting around having parties or whatever they imagine might be happening.
Yeah, they wanted to ensure that you were fiscally responsible.
Right.
And it probably isn't something you would share with all of your donors because it's complicated. I mean, the finances of a major arts institution are complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But for the right person who will understand the big picture, might be worth taking the executive director or the CFO to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I always learn a lot from Libby and the participants in these meetings, so thank you. We have time for a few more questions. Yes?
Can you talk about Wealth Engine and,
I kind of looked at what
Sure,
different
sure.
services they offer, and of course you have to call to find out how much it costs.
Sure. And there probably are some people in the room who use it more frequently than I do in my role because I'm a marketing and PR person. But our fundraisers at the Salvation Army have access to Wealth Engine. It's subscription-based software. I believe it's expensive. Okay, so maybe you guys use it and you know more about it, so can you share with the group?
You're gonna spend at least $3,000 to $5,000 a year on the subscription services. On top of that, into a large suite, so a large group of healthcare investment. That you get access to a lot of publicly available information in one unified place, like SEC filings, local contributions records, real estate, anything that's in the public domain, sort of to make your Googling much faster and more efficient. But also, many of them have some proprietary information where they collect donor listings from different organizations, and how to organize that better. You can be a lot more efficient in research.
Do you ever use NOSA?
I have, not anymore. NOSA is.
That's more cost effective, I'm just saying, because you can just pay by.
Sort
I'm
of.
not familiar with that one.
NOSA is a source for both Wealth Engine and
So, owned by Blackmore.
Oh, my God.
How do you spell NOSA? N-O-Z-A.
And another thing to look at, so King County, the King County Library System, the Center for Philanthropy is in Redmond. And they actually pay for many subscriptions to many different things where you have to physically go, but you can, and I don't know that they're a member, that they have the subscription to this, but they might. And then you can physically go there and do searches without having to purchase.
And that reminds me of the King County Library, there's a grants library.
Right.
What can help you with grant research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have a lot of
Which one
things.
you were talking about?
The King County Library System, the Center for Philanthropy, it's part of the King County Library System, but it's physically located in Redmond. The other thing, if you have like-minded organizations, get their annual report. Go online and get their annual report. I had many family members that are always like, oh, there she goes again. Because when I go anywhere that there's a program, I'm looking, So like-minded ones, though, because for 990s or whatever reason, they often have on their websites a way for you to get their annual report. If it's a similar, like for local kind of similar things, a village theater, something that kind of connects to your organization, and see where it won't necessarily tell you amounts, but it'll tell you where a lot of their funding comes from. And that's only the beginning. That's the prospecting on that circle.
Yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah. And then always talk to people, just say, hey, this is what I'm doing, and I had this happen in the school this week. We're trying to connect with more nonprofits, and I've been working with someone in our School of Applied Leadership, and somebody else in another program said, hey, do you know that he's on the board of the Washington Charter School Organization? I'm like, what? So I went, Joel, what? He said, yeah, actually, I'm in the past president. I'm like, and do they do fundraising? Yes. Do you think that I might want to connect? Oh, I didn't think about that. And that's what happens a lot, is to just engage people in conversations. You're picking their brains. They don't really know their 6 degrees of separation until you start chatting with them.
I've been doing that a lot in my expression of excitement about our transition and telling them about all the great things that I'm, planning on doing.
Right.
And that, it tends to spur them. And if it doesn't spur them, I actually ask, do you know anybody who would be excited about this stuff?
Right. And then thank you. And then they're like, and hey, let me tell you, I did meet with that person. This is what happened. I was so appreciative. Then you're reeling them in for some connection. You don't know what it's going to be, but chances are it's at least someone in the community who knows more about what you're doing.
I would also think about the Renton Technical College.
Yeah.
If you haven't already connected with it. Is it
Renton Technical Institute, I think, yeah.
Renton Technical Institute.
Well, and are you part of the chamber at Renton?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. You'll see me there too. Well, the Renton Chamber is a very robust chamber, and they have a nonprofit group that meets within it. Yeah, and so it's, you know, so they all help each other, and yeah. Cool.
Well, thank you all for being here today. Like I said, I always learn from the participants, so I really appreciate the opportunity to meet you all today, and hope that our paths cross again.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So, thank you. Hey, you get your thank you slide? There you go. Yeah, thank you so much. And I have your emails through Eventbrite, so I'll be sending you the slide deck. All I ask is that you use it as a slide deck for your knowledge, that you don't start presenting with the slide deck. It's just one of those. That would be not very comfortable. It would be, yeah, but you know, you kind of have to mention it sometimes. So, yeah. Good. Oh, before you leave, please, yeah, I forgot. I always forget this. A little bit of an evaluation, if you'd be able to fill that out. Are the Chinese fries still there? That's what happens when you go by every day.
Oh, I have to see those.
That's what happens when you go by every day. You know, you see them in the Chinese. See, you all knew what I meant. The terracotta soldiers. I'm gonna. No.
They're gonna build it up there.
Thank you.
I was afraid we were going to lose the lights at some point, but
Oh, it's this one fluorescent. It actually reminds me
What was your
of
name, by the way?
glass in this one.
Laura.
And then that too. Okay, you turn it over, just I'll take it. Yeah. Thank you, Mohammed. Yeah.
I mean, what did you do before you, Harvard City University and?
Yeah, so I was, almost 30 years in nonprofits, crisis clinic, Harvard Medical.
so did you told me you got for 2 years
No,
ago and then you started working here, or was it?
I've been at the Science Center for a little over a year.
And actually, I came to see you after getting.
Aidan Lane spoke at our annual luncheon this past year.
Oh,
So I had the
nice.
opportunity to work with some of your former colleagues, and he's
I taught him.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And I love what they're doing with that new,
Yeah.
the new building. I mean, that's kind
And,
of,
and then I
Cool.
went to advise.
I mean,
Maybe
it's
this
almost
week
kind
or
of
last
sad to
week they
leave
were
that you
lifting up a wall. Yeah.
You know what I did?
So.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, nice to meet you. I
Yeah,
mean, such a great opportunity to be.
Right, thank you so much.
I'm the director of the
Yeah, that's it.
So,
And now what
yeah,
I
we
have
have
is,
a director
I have a
for
combination
Okay.
fundraising.
You see, wow,
Yeah,
that's
so
great.
it's an
Sharing what I know
interesting
and
time
not
in
actually
science
being
center.
in the weeds of actually.
It deserves to
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
get back on.
I always say,
a robust fundraising program. So that's what we're trying to work on.
just because I hate asking for it, but you do transitioning in, so it's just, you know, right.
Kind of
Yeah, it's nice like being a little over a year in. I feel like we're starting to make, like the fires are put out and we're sort of starting to make directions, but it's also, I'm reminded, you know, we tried to donors for fundraisers, tried to talk to them in the last 5 years. They're probably like, who's gonna ride this out?
Why the
Like,
turnover?
yeah.
Why are there so many, you know, why did we go indoors?
So we're
I never realized until.
I'm trying to get started.
You want to,
Of course,
trash
trash
bag?
No, really, we really care about you.
So yeah, it's good.
So that hopefully. Yeah.
You know, but.
What's your, I'll probably do it.
Online
But
right
if
now.
we're about 30%.
Yeah, so,
Are you under
you
Michelle or
know,
you're
our
under?
major
No,
needs
I'm
are
under
very
Michelle.
short.
You are.
Yeah.
Business now, so
The online part is
self-sufficient.
and we're piecing together.
Right.
So like adding on add-on support to when people buy particularly down to us.
Right.
We can add on
Right.
it's more,
It
the
is
old building,
higher.
it is
Yeah.
adding on to only building on our campus that's not owned by the city. So we fully own, yeah.
Okay.
Add on to, fully own and are. So, you know, a lot of that is going to be so
Okay, this is what we were talking about, to clarify.
Right.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
kind of interesting, but, you know, one place that
Well, it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, I wish I would. But,
Okay.
you know, everyone. Yeah, it seems like it's. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
we're season.
Right.
And what garners the most money?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so you think that the website.
Oh, yeah.
All of them, literally all of them, yeah.
I try everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah, but I don't have to say.
partially one-side view.
Well, I just kind of get
So much in terms of websites per se, but
I
standardized.
taste it on the chef, and then I can leave, and then I a write-up of how the evening went in the kitchen.
More
Which
about
you
get the data.
a couple of chefs ago, this one started.
So it's a lot of the same things, but I see what you're saying. Every website is bad anyway, so how are they using it?
I mean,
Exactly.
it's hard
Yeah.
because it takes time, but he enjoys
See ya.
it too.
Yeah, I mean,
And
do you know any of?
every aspect, you know, from his perspective, like,
Does the
that
science
chef
center
had the most talent.
website work or like just
You know,
no
so
other
he editorializes, and then what I do is I take
Yeah, I
what
mean,
he
you know,
said,
we
just kind of
definitely
what
deal with it.
my
Okay,
interaction
sure,
with
yeah.
it
What's,
was, and then I read
oh,
thank
what's
you.
your
So
background?
it really is
so yeah, I've run a second graphic
and
website
then it goes to
Oh, okay.
student leaders too, so they get a sense of,
So
oh,
I have a
that
tech
sounds like you're
website
great
background,
students.
know that side as well.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to.
But, yeah, and I don't think we ever did that before.
Yeah.
My career shift.
Yeah, well, if you ever
Branch out into.
want to, do you have
Thank
a
you.
nice
Well,
meeting?
that's a follow-up.
Yeah, you and your
My
husband
card
should.
here.
Okay, great.
And then, so, I may not be the person to talk to, but at least we should connect, yeah.
Follow up.
Yeah, cool. What was the name of your
Oh,
website?
it's called.
Volunteering is
Yeah, I'll send it to you in email.
Great, cool.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, yeah. Talk to you later.
But look,
But I mean, I'm happy to pass it.
we only have 4 chefs at a time online, but pretty much, I mean, we have some.
Forgot my umbrella.
I think the last one was with Jonathan Sunstrom a couple
Oh,
like a
yeah.
year or so ago.
Yes.
So.
He's always good. And then we had Eden. And we have actually our chef, Jason Wilson, who just did the.
My daughter just,
Gonna be there.
I'll wear anything.
Next week.
It's really nice. It's a program, but it's a good reason. We're supporting chef that we like. Oh, Jonathan Sunstrom's going to be.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet
Thank
you.
you.
Oh,
Thank
don't
you.
send your name
I'm
tag.
gonna send you,
Oh.
you're gonna send me an email.
Yep.
And then I'm gonna send you that.
Okay, thank you, yeah.
Museum studies. And so-
Or if you wanted to
support the, like, oh, you know, because we know Jonathan Sunstrom pretty well, and so we go to Clark regularly.
And so,
To be able to say, hey, we're coming here tonight at Fair Stars.
See, and I think they love it.
she's in,
And
because
because,
interest.
you know, it's,
That's what
I always
she's
hope they send it out to
she's
their regular
marketing.
diners too, because it's nice to see them supported vice versa. We try to promote them
So,
to our
so I sort of,
audiences too, so
and
people
I
will go
think
to
of
their
it because
restaurant. I mean,
long,
to me,
long ago,
some of
I
our
had
diners
said,
will
because I grew up in
go,
New
wow, I haven't been to this restaurant, but this was so good, I want to go
York.
and support them. So that's, it's really a two-way street, you know.
Years that
She
she,
talked about a guy who went through our
and I don't think I
program
ever
and is now in your program, or?
But
He
I-
graduated, and now he's
she
a
always started about
lead
colleges and art history.
sous chef at, no, lead line chef at Skillets.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have really hired many of
I mean,
their
I still have sisters.
friends that they met in our, Michael Carter is
Well, the
like
pride.
the.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
GM or the top.
Right, did he go through
Yeah.
Salvation Army?
Like,
Well, it was interesting, because,
and I learned
my
more about
niece
farms
was
and
asking me, because I wrote the story,
fry,
and
well,
she, and I had written
how
it
the
one way,
fry
and she goes, well,
the reason the fry was the fry.
it sounds, do they have a culinary, how could he be in the kitchen, because I was talking about it, and I thought this was really I thought maybe it was
experiences,
experiences, but I thought it was really interesting that the chef there, that this guy, he was one of the first common meals grabs. And he was kind of this fiery Gordon Ramsay sort of chef. No, at Salvation Army, that he, you know, was in the kitchen, he worked in the kitchen there. And so she was like, well, I don't know if you need that. I said, I think it's really interesting that your Salvation Army, one of the people working there was one of our original, before Common Meals was a forerunner to Fair Start. And he's working, and this guy, he went through there for a friend. And that,
How long ago was this, do you know?
let's see, I would say within the last year.
Okay. Interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks for contributing.
Because do you have a kitchen, or what does a kitchen
No,
do?
so basically what he was cooking at is, well, I mean,
It was just like, it wasn't culinary.
no, we have no culinary program, but we have many of our buildings with commercial kitchens.
Right.
Because we're serving community meals.
Oh,
So like
yeah.
in Renton, every day we're serving dinner to whoever wants to come in and get it. So we have a commercial kitchen there. Or, on the east side of Bellevue, we have every night dinner, but I'm guessing what they did is here's our adult rehabilitation program, or for alcohol rehab program. We have a commercial kitchen there, business.
Yeah,
They're
and
there
they,
for 6
and
months.
he,
They have to
and
eat.
he
So-
was working, it's like in prison in a way. Somebody has to work in the
Right, so
kitchen.
as part of their rehab, there is one there.
Yes.
Some people have to work front desk, some people have to work in the thrift store, some people have to work
phones.
phones, and then some people have to work in the kitchen.
Oh, yes.
You know,
When is the pitch?
And it's not always
It's ready.
what.
When
they
do you have a
are most
date
of.
you have, or when
So part of
No,
the.
I'm
to get
still
them
working
out
on
of there.
information how to
And this is
Oh,
reach
okay.
the
people make
Okay.
decisions
All right.
above and beyond me.
I can
We know that we this person needs to
Yeah.
confidence building.
Send me,
This person needs to work
you have my
towards
email, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we'll make a
yeah.
date.
Sure.
to be
All right,
maybe,
good,
Thank
good, you're
for
welcome.
lack of a better expression, homogenous, because they're a little too young.
Right.
So they know these, there's 100 men and 20 women in the room any given day. So they give them jobs that they know will help as part of the rehabilitation.
That makes
And
complete
they
sense.
move them around. So it might be that they start in the front desk. You have to meet and greet visitors, and they're not comfortable doing that, but then maybe after a few months, and they get to.
And it wasn't like he was, in a program, it was like.
Was he in the drug program?
Yes,
He was in the rehab program,
yes,
right.
and so he had
So he was
to,
working in the kitchen.
and that was not, it's not a learning experience, you learn,
It's not a
teaching.
culinary
No,
experience, but you are learning, of course, you're learning.
yes,
right?
exactly.
So we have both types of people. We have people who have amazing high-powered jobs who come to us because they are at the end of their rope.
Right,
And then we have people who
right.
come to us.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like Fair Start too. And sometimes, I think it might be, and I don't know the statistics of how many people come from Salvation to Fair Start.
Well, it's, if there aren't a lot of opportunities for these people. Especially if you have a background.
Oh, yeah.
Background. It's hard to find a job.
I mean, construction
Right.
or culinary, pretty much, are the only two
Yeah, that regular.
avenues that you can.
So-
That you can find with competitive avenues. Yeah.
Right. So I think it's natural that and then you hear about it, right? They see the success. There's so many people coming out of Fair Start who are successful. They hear about the 20 beds we've had at our shelter that look at what these guys are doing. They're going to Fair Start every day. They're getting a job.
Well, and another reason, I mean, we had on Monday 29 people at our open orientation. The weather gets cold, and
that's
people want a place to stay.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a big reason that people even come.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's okay, but then they learn they're like.
yes,
wow.
and it's interesting too to talk to some of them, because some of them come and they really don't like, they know nothing about cooking, they don't really like it, but there's something about food, and many of them will really get into it. And other people just,
Not for them.
exactly, which is true of anything.
Right.
It's not, and all we want is people to be successful. I mean, there's one guy who, I interviewed him, and he's been out like 8 years, he graduated. He's always liked real estate. he has a passion for housing. So he met someone and he started working with him and they flipped houses and he's very successful doing that. And he has like online meetup groups. And now he really wants to come back and in fact, he signed up to start volunteering it.
It's fantastic.
And I think those are the people that you just think, wow, you really make a impact.
I would love to get together with you and share
Really-
best practices sometime. So
Oh.
I'll email you. I'd love
Okay,
to
well,
get together.
yeah, so I will send you the newsletter.
Okay.
Salvation
Thank
Army.
you. I'd love to share that with my
Yeah, and actually, I could probably talk to our ops department and have them send it to, say, like Sound Mental Health, who we mentioned.
Great, you should send it to everyone
Yeah.
who are your partners.
Yeah, because we really, I mean, those partnerships are key.
Crucial.
Yeah. So
All right, thank you,
thanks
Joyce.
All right, thanks for coming.
I'm gonna eat one of your little
Oh,
sandwiches
eat
here.
'em. That's what they're there for.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and thank you for not, being bothered by me interrupting.
No, I really appreciate it. I like this, and you can contribute. You always have a little different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
Ooh,
And I can keep.
I don't mind at all.
All right. Good. That's good. All right. Oh, whose is this? Is that hers? She was in the lobby doing something.
Oh, good.
Oh, good. You need almond milk? Does anybody at your staff need almond milk?
No, I'm sure they do, but.
I'm really blessed because some number of years ago, I finally computed how terrible I felt if I ate sugar during the day.
Oh, wow.
Especially at work, because it just would make me exhausted, I get a headache, and
Yeah.
I want to go home.
Mhm.
And the moment dinner was over, I'm like stalking the house. What is there? What is there?
So I'm
And,
curious what this guy does here.
he wants to start a nonprofit. He's a tech person. He's a techie.
Okay.
And it's actually kind of a smart, he wants to create a nonprofit that would allow people to access and find data on giving and various things like that with it all in one place. Because there's,
That's interesting.
because like that thing I said about online giving, that's from the Black Claw
Yeah.
giving in 2016. But if you go to the, whatever the other place is, it's slightly different. And while those are great national stats, I want to know about King County.
Right.
And I'm also big on sometimes this whole dump on millennials is really starting to bother me.
I said to one of my staff members, I have three people who work for me, two of them are millennials.
Yeah.
I'm like,
you just must think this is hysterical.
Right.
And how every meeting about fundraising is talking about millennials.
Right.
I said, how does that make you feel?
Right. It feels terrible to them because it's just not, and especially when it's baby boomers that are doing it.
Right.
Because you think in 1972 when they were all hippies, they were giving to groups? No. It's just not what you do. You're having fun, you're getting married, you're having kids. It's not the phase
Right.
of your life when you do that.
Right, and I think maybe the difference is that there's a perception that these people are making so much money.
Yeah. Which may or may not be true. And
Right.
if they are, many of them
They
have
need it to buy houses.
right, or they
Okay,
have a
right.
burden of loans that the generation before or the baby boomers didn't have because it was more affordable to go to college and our parents could actually help us pay for it rather than getting a loan.
The other thing that really frustrates me is when our leadership says, we need younger donors, we need younger donors.
Yeah.
Well, define younger. Because
Yeah.
you know what we need? We need donors in their 40s and 50s.
Right, because the average donor to your organization is a 69-year-old woman.
Right. Oh, I think we already had this conversation.
Yeah, we did, yeah. Well vented, but doesn't stop us from yet again. Yeah, it is a cycle, and when you get to the cycle and you realize, oh, we need to start working on the cycle again, that's what it really is. They haven't kept up with working with the cycle. You get complacent about all these great donors, and then you start to experience a gap, and you're like, uh-oh. But it must happen in every generation, right? Except that fundraising
You're right,
is
you're
so
an
much.
example of the 50s.
Yeah.
Like people before them were complaining and
Yeah.
wondering why they
Here
weren't
I am
pulling
in
their.
fundraising, I've done everything I can, I give all this money. Did I give any money in my 20s? No.
I'm going to use that. That is a
Yeah.
very, very good example.
Yeah, because they're looking at themselves from now,
Right.
from who they are now, not who they were when they were the age. And they might say, oh, well, we didn't have any money. Well, most millennials don't either. They have terrible student loans.
Right.
Well,
And yeah, it sounds like they're making a lot of money, but
Right.
the fact is, if you want to live in the city.
right. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah.
I really appreciate and I need to follow up with some of these people. I really appreciate the people I meet in these opportunities.
Yeah.
Really, really great people.
Yeah, they are. They really are. I was thrilled to have those signs.
Those science fair people were very interesting.
See, that's what I need to kind of
So
help
they're-
expand.
They are
this.
in major flux over there with
Yeah, what
fundraising.
happened? They went down the tubes there for some period of time.
We have a board member who used to work there.
Oh.
And I don't know what happened, if it was just poor management or something, but the one guy here just told me they're really going to focus now on their permanent collection because they've been so focused on these touring exhibits.
Oh, which cost a lot.
And their permanent exhibits, their permanent exhibits need a lot of attention.
Yeah, because they're probably out of date or,
So those dinosaurs are
tired.
from the 80s.
Yeah, which is when I would have been taking my job. No, 90s when I would have taken my job.
Okay. I wonder if it's raining up there.
I
see an umbrella.
I think you should assume that it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lydia. I picked up your little card. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, you did. Good. You saw that.
Yeah. Thank you so
Not
much
much
for the
not much I
opportunity.
can offer, but it's something.
I actually didn't open it.
Oh, well, then you'll be surprised later.
Okay. I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
Good. Well, we'll come around again, so.
I'm really going to come and sit in on some of these. So
Oh, okay.
Christmas is this time of year. In fact, I don't know why I agreed to do this in November because I get so busy at Christmas time.
Yeah, well, I'm doing 2 in December, one in Everett, one in Renton, to try and get other places.
And then maybe in the new year when you do another one, if you do another one here, I'd love to come and sit. And
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I will.
Get it on my calendar.
Yeah, I'd like to get, and I mean, actually even toying with the idea, because I'm gonna do the summer. I could add one to be here, but.
I have my jump drive. I have everything,
You have it.
so
All right.
I think I'm all set.
We're still recording, and Kobe's, I don't know what he's doing, just laughing at us somewhere.
Watching me eat my sandwich.
Yeah, me too. So I'm gonna go tell him.